Metroidvanias are in right now. Some of the most popular indie games from the last few years have fallen into the Metroidvania category. We've got Cave Story, Hollow Knight, Axiom, Verge, Blasphemous, Owlboy, and a ton more. So let's say you want to make a Metroidvania. How are you ever going to stand out? How can we reinvent the wheel of the Metroidvania genre? Well, I've recently scoured the internet looking for games large and small that creatively push the traditional Metroidvania formula. Today, we're going to play some of the best ones that I've come across and see what we can learn from them. I'm Jack Breen, and this is Hybrid Plays. To push the boundaries of the Metroidvania genre, we first need to understand its conventions. A Metroidvania, as Urban Dictionary claims, is a game that focuses on non-linear exploration, item retrieval, and proper usage of said items to progress, which is strange because I thought Urban Dictionary was just a site for sex terms. Regardless, this definition pretty much hits the nail on the head. A Metroidvania is always non-linear, always includes backtracking, and always sees the player acquiring upgrades to be able to access new areas. I call these things the three pillars of the Metroidvania genre, and I talked about them in one of my earlier videos. These three pillars give us a pretty good idea of what to expect from any given Metroidvania that we come across. So, with so many Metroidvanias hitting the market every day, and with so many similarities between them, how can we create something that turns this formula on its head? To kick things off, I want to talk about one of the earliest games that took this genre in a new direction. That game is Blaster Master. As if there wasn't enough proof that the 80s were an absolutely lawless time, Blaster Master is a game where your pet frog escapes his tank, gets radiation poisoning from some shit on your property, and jumps down a hole, leaving you with no other option than to chase after him in a tank. Blaster Master has you exploring a subterranean world, blasting away alien robots and acquiring upgrades for your tank that allow you to progress. You'll get things like a laser that can shoot through blocks, the hover ability that lets you fly, and the sticky wheels which let you drive up walls. Each area of the game is built in true Metroidvania fashion. You find yourself going up, down, left, and right, and most rooms have multiple doors, which makes finding your way to the boss a lot like solving a maze. So here's where the innovation comes in. You're not confined to the tank. You can get out and take control of Jason, who is way more vulnerable and takes fall damage, but is able to enter these sub-areas. In here, gameplay switches from platforming to top-down shooting, and it's in these areas that the bosses are found. I think this is a very interesting concept, because while most Metroidvanias are confined to side-scrolling, Blaster Master has you constantly switching between playstyles. Each area contains a bunch of these Jason areas for you to explore. Only one of them contains the boss chamber, but the others are worth exploring as they'll reward you with health, ammunition, and these gun upgrades that improve Jason's weapon. Every time you collect one, this meter increases. The first couple levels improve your range and rate of fire. The 5th and 6th levels give you curving bullets, and the last 2 levels make you shoot in a wave pattern with a level 8 gun letting you shoot through walls. Seeing as the bosses are fought outside the safety of your tank, you're going to want Jason's gun to be as powerful as you can get it before you reach the boss chamber. This gives you the incentive to explore these optional Jason areas in hopes of finding more gun upgrades. However, every time you take a hit as Jason, you lose a level off your gun. This turns exploring for gun parts into a huge risk and reward system, because once you do get the gun up to full power, you'll be anxiously tiptoeing your way back to the tank trying not to lose your upgrades before you reach the boss. This concept of switching between playstyles hadn't been explored much before this, and I feel like it's still somewhat rare to see. Funny enough, one of the only other games that I know of that does do something similar is Zelda 2, although whereas Blaster Master has you play through its overworld in side view and its boss areas in top-down, Zelda has you exploring its main map in top-down and doing all of your fighting in side-scrolling. But the similarities between these games pretty much stops there, because Blaster Master takes this idea and really runs with it. Because you're not just switching camera angles, you're also switching characters, weapons, and stats. In the tank, you have all these special weapons you can use, but they hold a finite amount of ammunition, while Jason, on the other hand, has infinite ammo, but your attack power relies on your ability to keep from taking damage. And if you're out in the wild trying to reach a boss area, it doesn't really matter how much damage you take as the tank, because Jason has his own independent health bar that'll be good to go as soon as you step out. Another thing that sets this game apart from Zelda 2 is that Blaster Master is actually good. Oh come on, look at this shit! One of the game's most innovative areas is the water level. When you get here, you'll drive your tank into the water, only to quickly realize that you can't jump. Your only choice is to float down and down until you hit the seafloor, and at that point you can't do anything other than get out and play as Jason. Now, prior to this, the only reasonable time to disembark from the tank is if you're literally right outside one of these sub-area doors. Playing as Jason at any other point is just going to get you killed. We know how vulnerable he is, so being forced out of your tank in a new area with no shelter in sight is a very anxious moment. Along with the tension, this changes up the gameplay in multiple ways. As Jason, you no longer have access to the missiles and other alternate weapons your tank has, but to make up for it, you're swimming, so you can maneuver around enemies in ways you normally wouldn't be able to. Eventually, you'll come across the top-down area that houses the boss, and if you beat him, you'll unlock the propeller, which lets the tank swim around like a submarine. This is one of those really satisfying moments in a Metroidvania where you get to go back through an area that kicked your ass and get your revenge. When you first enter the area, your mobility is kinda slow, and your attack power is limited. These enemies are sure to cause you some problems. But once you're able to go back through here with the tank, you'll be able to wreck these guys at full force. This whole area is a really clever way to force you to play outside of the tank, and it's a great way to turn the main mechanic on its head. Inti Creates has now taken over the Blaster Master mantle and has continued to innovate this formula in the Blaster Master Zero games. One new decision that I liked is that not all bosses are fought in top-down mode anymore. Some battles will take place while still in the tank, and they're a lot of fun. They also added a chick with watermelon tits, so that's nice, I guess. Blaster Master's perspective switching hook may seem relatively simple on the surface, but I believe it opens up a lot of possibilities. For instance, if side-scrolling and top-down shooting can be combined, what else could you mash together for a Metroidvania? Maybe you could make a game where the overworld is traversed in top-down and sub-areas are done in first-person. Or maybe you could do the opposite of what Blaster Master does, where a majority of gameplay would be done on your own, but for boss areas, you could get access to a vehicle. Could you make Star Fox a Metroidvania? Could you make Pikmin a Metroidvania? The big takeaway is this: Blaster Master takes two styles of gameplay and combines them flawlessly to create an interesting experience. While most Metroidvanias are just side-scrollers and others are just top-down, Blaster Master proves that you don't have to choose between the two. The most recent game that I've seen that resembles the concept of Blaster Master is Gato Roboto, a Metroid-style platformer that has you controlling a cat who's controlling a mech. In the mech, you can jump, shoot, and take quite the beating from enemies. But at times, you're forced to leave the comforts of the mech and play as Kiki, the cat, and Kiki only has 1 health point. On top of that, Kiki isn't able to attack. This is just like playing as Jason outside of the tank, except we're even more vulnerable now. Even Jason was still able to defend himself, but as Kiki, you're completely helpless. The trade-off is that Kiki can do things her mech can't, like climb up walls, fit into tight spaces, and swim.
Oh shit, it's time for our sponsor! This whole video is sponsored by Jason.
So Blaster Master and Gato Roboto are both amazing games, but now I want to introduce two other games that really push Metroidvania design into new territory, the first of which is called After Hours. After Hours describes itself as a Metroidvania in reverse. The game has already been beaten, you play as the janitor, and it's your job to put all the items back where they go. This is a short little project, it only took me a few minutes to beat, but I think the idea has loads of potential. You start off by collecting all of the items at once. The lava boots, which let you walk through lava, the gun, which lets you shoot away certain doors, the high jump helmet, which lets you jump higher, and the morph backpack, which is kind of like the morph ball. Now here's the interesting part. The challenge isn't returning the items, it's figuring out which order to return them in. I started the game off by just exploring the map and looking for where to put things back. I went up this shaft here and found a spot for the lava boots, and then I went all the way to the left and found where the gun goes. At this point, I was like, this is easy, I'm the best janitor ever, fucking look at me, but then, I go down here, and I run into lava. I couldn't walk through it anymore because I had already put the boots back. This was the moment when I realized that there was going to have to be a lot more strategy to the order in which I put these upgrades back. This led me to exploring the entire map to try to get an overview of which areas required which upgrades. I found that one area needed the gun to get to, which I had also already put back, and I also found the spot for the high jump helmet, but immediately after placing it on the statue, I realized I was going to still need it to go get the gun, so I grabbed it again. Shamefully. So I went back to the upper left-hand area, and after having a full aneurysm trying to perform basic platforming, retrieved the boots so that I could return to where the lava was. I proudly trekked across the lava, and I went back and got the gun, and found myself with all 4 items again, right back to how I had started. This game was proving to be fairly challenging, but I was having a blast. I mean, this is such a different way to think about a Metroidvania. After Hours is exactly what the devs say it is, a Metroidvania in reverse. You even start off all the way on the right side of the map and travel left, which fits the theme perfectly. After Hours is a short experience, but it's bursting at the seams with potential. Let's say you add combat, how would it be handled? The Metroid-looking enemies you meet along your mission are treated like actors who are on break. They just hang out and give you advice in a very fourth wall breaking way. So if a more expansive version of this game was made, who would the enemies be? Are there janitors you're competing with? Maybe an angsty boss? OSHA? There are so many hilarious possibilities. Another note about combat is that you'd be defenseless once you gave up the gun, so would the player always have a backup weapon? Maybe a janitor's mop? A full game would also most likely have a much bigger map and more abilities to put away, and if I had trouble with just these 4, I'm sure that would make for quite the puzzle. Overall, After Hours is a super clever concept with a lot of promise behind it. I would be stoked if the developers decide to pick this up again and make a full release out of it. There's one more unique Metroidvania that I want to talk about today, and that's Allocation. Allocation is a game that was made for the Game Maker's Toolkit Jam back in 2018. The theme of the jam was genre without mechanic, meaning that jammers had to make a game that was absent of the main mechanic usually found in the genre. For example, a platformer without jumping, or a racing game without a car. Developer Mush decided to make a Metroidvania without an interconnected world. The result is Allocation, a game where you build the world yourself. You start off in this central computer room, which you'll find yourself returning to a lot. The bottom of the screen shows the map, with your location marked in green. You can see that there are other spots on the map that you need to get to, but there are no connecting rooms in between you and them. Likewise, the doors are disabled because they don't lead anywhere yet. To solve this problem, you need to interact with the computer system and access the map editor. At the start of the game, you have 2 rooms that you can place on the map, each with a left and right exit. Given these options, there's only 1 room on the map that you can reach right now, but when you get there, you unlock more placeable rooms. This allows you to go back to the map editor and build a path to another location. As you unlock more rooms, you're given more options on what order to explore the map in. Another interesting concept is the room difficulty levels. Each room falls into one of these 3 categories. Easy rooms are yellow and usually only have a few enemies, medium rooms are orange and start to get a bit harder, and hard rooms are red with complicated platforming and loads of enemies. To mix things up, there are also 2 healing rooms that you can unlock and place along your path to give you somewhere to rest at. The game ends once you've unlocked enough rooms to reach this bottom right area of the map. Allocation took me only about 15 minutes to beat, but I loved every second of it. This game is the definition of potential. There are so many things you could do with this idea. For instance, maybe the boss chambers are rooms that you unlock and place yourself, like the healing rooms. Maybe you can get teleporter rooms that would essentially allow you to make your own fast travel system. Maybe the map is much bigger and divided up into environmental zones, so whatever rooms you place there take on the properties of said zone. Like, if you put this room in the ice area, the floor becomes slippery, but if you were to put the same room in the lava area, the room gets really hot and you can only stay in there for a limited amount of time. And if you put it in the water area, the whole thing becomes flooded. Maybe rooms aren't the only thing that you could place on the map. Maybe you can unlock ammo crates and you get to choose where they go for ease of access later on. And we haven't even talked about player progression yet. Getting new abilities in this game would be really interesting. Let's say you have a room like this. You can use it to go left and right, and you can also use it to go up, but you can't reach that part yet. So at first you just use this room as a means to travel horizontally. But later on you get the double jump, and you realize that now you can use this room to move vertically on the map as well. The list of possibilities goes on, and since my game designer brain never shuts off, I couldn't help but keep fantasizing about all of these ideas while I played through this game. Allocation really pushes the Metroidvania genre in a new way by asking the question, what if the player made their own map? Which is really fascinating because so many Metroidvanias rely on intricate handcrafted worlds with very deliberate design choices. When you take this away, you're choosing to alter one of the biggest pieces of the Metroidvania puzzle. So, Mush, if you're watching, you have something really special here, and I would love to see you expand upon it. The Metroidvania genre is one of my favorites, and while I'll always love the traditionally structured ones like Axiom, Verge, and Super Metroid, it's a real treat to see games that try to break the mold. Blastermaster is conventional in its structure, but very creative in its gameplay. And while After Hours and Allocation are both very small projects, they're really well designed and bursting with potential. Today's video wasn't really meant to teach a specific lesson, it was more so just to get you thinking outside the box on Metroidvania design. Nevertheless, let's do a quick review of the biggest takeaways from the games we've looked at. Blastermaster shows us that games don't have to be confined to one camera angle or subgenre. Instead of keeping your game locked down as a platformer, think about how you can combine elements from other seemingly unrelated games. Could you make a Metroidvania out of tower defense gameplay? What about racing gameplay, or cooking gameplay? Of course, as we saw, there's a lot more to Blastermaster's logic than just changing the camera angle. Try experimenting with ways to make the player change playstyles, such as forcing them in and out of a tank at certain times. After Hours shows us that even the janitor's story can be an interesting one. Most games start with the inception of some sort of problem and end with a final battle that resolves everything. But what stories exist outside of that? What kind of game would take place right after the final battle, or right before the exposition? In terms of gameplay, After Hours succeeds at being different because it flips one of the biggest Metroidvania staples. Instead of collecting abilities as you progress, you lose them. Allocation brings a whole new meaning to non-linear design. Instead of just giving the player the ability to travel all around the map, why not let them make the map themselves? Giving the player this amount of freedom is sure to spark creativity, and that adds a ton to the replay value of the game. Overall, think outside the box, be weird, and have fun. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this gets your creative juices flowing and inspires you to make your own awesome Metroidvanias. If you're working on a project right now that you want me to play for the channel, comment below or message me on Twitter. I always love to see what you guys are making. Now, speaking of Metroidvanias, in case you didn't see my last video, I'm actually working on my own game project right now. It's a Metroidvania called Gigasword, and I actually just took it to PAX East a few weeks ago, where a bunch of people got to play it for the first time. I met some awesome people and got some great feedback, and overall everyone really seems to enjoy it. People are like actually excited for it, which is amazing, so if you haven't seen it yet, you can check out my reveal video in the description below. But that's enough about me. Before I go, I want to thank my amazing Patreon supporters who help make this show possible. You guys are the best. With that, I will see you guys next time, and take care.
All this shit wasn't here. Get my fucking thing out now.
You're live.